Today we're going to talk about Act 1. And Act 1, specifically the first part when you're working with a buyer. This is going to delve a little bit into buyer psyche and personality types. But this probably is the most important part of working with a buyer, and it's really setting the foundation. And the things that we're going to talk about in this Act 1 or first part of working with buyers are going to lead to writing fewer offers and or getting more offers accepted, I think is the answer there, and showing fewer properties to the same buyers. And then in addition, effectively, like I said, in multiple offer situations, winning more. And Carma, this really bounces off of what we talked about last week in terms of negotiation and the 5 points of negotiation. So the video is about, I think, 11 minutes, just under 11 minutes. So we're going to get started here. Cool.
All right.
So we'll get started. As always, please type your takeaways into the chat. That would be great as you hear them. And we'll go ahead and get started.
Hello and welcome to the Ninja Path. My name is Larry Kendall and I'm the author of Ninja Selling. And our goal is to help you increase your income per hour so that you can have a life. We have found that if you focus on these 3 success keys, that will happen. Number 1, your mindset. Number 2, your skill set. And number 3, the actions that you take on a daily basis. This particular lesson today is on your skill set. And it's your skill set in working with buyers. Many of you are in what we call the mosh pit market. You are in a market where there's a shortage of inventory, there's multiple offers, and in the mosh pit you jump in and there's a lot of pushing and shoving and you hope you come out with a contract. So when you're in that kind of a market, we're going to offer you some ideas. The ideas that we're going to suggest to you, though, will work in all kinds of markets, but they're especially important if you're in a mosh pit market. I'd like to mention a gentleman named Chris Doyle. Chris is a partner of mine at the group real estate company in Colorado. Very successful. His gross commission income last year was over $500,000. He served 57 clients. 13 were sellers and 44 were buyers. That is very unusual. Typically, somebody who's playing at the level that Chris is playing, they would have more sellers than buyers. And we're in a mosh pit market, so when I saw that he had 44 buyers, I said, gee, Chris, how many contracts did you have to write to close 44 buyers? It would not be unusual in a multiple offer market to have to write 100, 200 contracts to close 44. He tracks everything. He says, Larry, I wrote 49 contracts. He closed 90% of the contracts he wrote, even though he was in competition almost every time. What was really interesting is Chris also only showed a maximum of 4 homes to a buyer. Many of his buyers, he showed 1, 2, 3 homes. The most he ever showed to a buyer that year was 4 homes. Chris is a pro, and that's because he has a great, what we call Act 1 of the buyer process. So when we talk about Act 1, working with buyers really is 3 acts. It's a 3-act play. And you are the director. You control the process, and your buyers control the decisions. But you have to control this process and make sure that you do all 3 acts. Act number 1 is the buyer counseling. Chris spends at least an hour or 2 before they ever look at houses. Act 2 then is showing the property. And Act 3 is the soft closing, where you ask the buyer for commitment to buy the house, and the follow-up that's necessary after the contract to get to the closing table. What I notice is many realtors skip Act 1. They simply jump in the car and start showing houses. And I watch them driving like crazy, hair on fire, showing property, writing contracts, and not having closings. And that's because they're not investing the time up front in Act 1. So we're going to focus on Act 1 for this lesson. Tammy Spalding, who's a very successful ninja, one of the top in the country, she puts it this way. I'm investing more time up front in the process. She's investing more time up front in a mosh pit market than in a normal market. So often I hear, well, our market's moving so fast, you don't have time to sit down with a buyer for an hour or 2. You need to jump in the car and go. Tammy would say, hey, go slow to go fast. Chris would say the same thing. That Act 1, make sure you go through your 10-step buyer process. On step number 10, when you get to the last step, And you ask this question, when we find it, what will you do? This is the opportunity now to go a little bit further and talk about the market and the dynamics of the market, what they're about to go into. In their particular price range, how likely is it that they're going to need to pay full price or above? How likely is it that they're going to be in a multiple offer situation? Talk about the market dynamics now that you know the kind of property they're looking for. Secondly, go through the negotiation dynamics. Go through with them the contract, the 5 negotiating points of a contract, how negotiations work. And one of the things that Chris is really good at is identifying the buyer's risk tolerance. We're going to focus on that for this lesson. How do you determine how risk tolerant your buyer is in a multiple offer environment? Make sure you counsel your buyers on the market before they're in the market. Don't have them learn about the market by jumping into the market. Likewise, counsel them on negotiations before they're in a negotiation. Don't let them learn the hard way once they're in a negotiation. Here's an idea that will help you. Barb Imes, who's a partner of mine at the group, she came up with a simple little one-page form called Offer Strategies to Win. And we've provided this to you in your handouts. And it's just simply a series of questions to determine what is the buyer willing to do. For example, on price, are you willing to pay above full price? Are you willing to pay with no upper limit? Are you willing to pay with an upper limit? Are you willing to put in what we call a bump up clause? On terms, obviously cash is king, cash, conventional, FHA, what type of terms? And so you go through this simple little form, and it's a questionnaire to go over with your buyers. And it will help them understand the different strategies that they may have to engage to win the contract. One of the things that this feeds into beautifully is the 4 personality types: power, party, peace, and perfection. And those 4 personalities relate to risk very, very differently. If you look at their decision strategies, power and party people, they're risk takers, they like to win, and they really enjoy the drama of the mosh pit. They like the multiple offers, and they like the pushing and the shoving and all of that. They're very comfortable with that. And when you go over the Offer Strategies to Win worksheet, many times they're very comfortable with those. However, when you look at the peace and perfection buyers, they're risk avoiders. They don't like to lose. They're devastated if they compete for a property and lose. They don't like that. They like certainty. They don't like a lot of change. They like guarantees. And so if you start to see them freezing up when you're going through the Offer Strategies worksheet, that's a pretty good indication that they're a peace and perfection buyer. And when you find that, they may be very uncomfortable in the mosh pit. What you want to do is counsel using their particular strategy. Here's what Chris does. When he finds that he has a peace or perfection buyer, he says, you know what? Why don't we do this? Why don't we take the summer off? The summer is mosh pit season. That's when there's the most buyers and the least amount of inventory available. Why don't we consider a slower time of the year? Typically, the slower seasons is the first quarter and the fourth quarter. You won't have as much competition. We may even be able to buy a house without having multiple offers. Why don't you take the summer off and let's get back together in September. He says, you'll watch that peace and perfection buyer just relax, okay? He says, now I may call you this summer if I see a special situation, a special opportunity. One of which is if I spot a property that has poor MLS information. Maybe it doesn't have a photo, or it's got poor photos, or maybe it's not properly represented. I know it's 4-bedroom and it's represented as a 3-bedroom. Anything like this could taint the property, in which case it's not going to get the showings, and it might be an opportunity for us. If I see that, I'm going to give you a call. The second thing that could happen is if I see a property that fits your criteria hitting the market on a holiday. It's 4th of July weekend, everybody's at the lake or everybody's at the mountains, and here comes that cream puff property. Hardly anybody's working. I'm going to give you a call. We might be able to slip in and buy that property. We're going to keep an eye on the weather. Recently, we had a late spring, wasn't even a snowstorm, it was a slush storm. broke a lot of limbs on trees. It was miserable out. Chris has a four-wheel drive, a property hit that was perfect for his peace and perfection buyer. And he called and said, you know, I know it's nasty out, but now's the time to go. Everybody else is hunkered down. They're all inside. Nobody's out looking at houses. Can you go? Can you go now? And they bought that property. Or if there's a special situation, you know, keep an eye out for expired listings. Believe it or not, even in a hot market, people overprice properties. And also what we know is that nationally, about 23% to 30%, it varies, depending on part of country that you're in, about 23 to 30% of contracts are falling out. So this really hot property with multiple offers hits the market and goes under contract, and then for whatever reason, the buyer gets buyer remorse, or it doesn't appraise, or it doesn't inspect, but it comes back on the market. What happens? Properties back on the market are tainted. And buyers say, and realtors say, what's wrong with that property? Chris is watching for those expired listings and those back on the market properties. If he sees one, he's going to call you this summer. So let's do this. Let's take a moment to rehearse the Offer Strategies to Win worksheet. Use that little template. Practice asking those questions to determine your buyer's risk tolerance and what is their personality. This little template will really help you identify the personality and the risk tolerance of your buyers. If you follow the system will work for you. And we've shown you the path. It's now time to rehearse, and you have to walk it. We hope you've enjoyed this lesson. Thank you for joining us.
I hope you have your packet that we'd sent out just prior to about 15 minutes before we started. So if you have that, there are a couple things we're going to use that for. But before we go into that and we walk through the 10 steps quickly as an overview for those of you that have been through Ninja and know it as a refresher, or those of you that haven't been through Ninja so you get a good glimpse into it. Before that, I just want to stress the importance of, and one second here, I'm going to turn off the share. The importance really of step one, act one, of setting the expectations and everything Larry talks about. And when you use the example of Tammy Spalding, whose photo is great, probably not updated, but I've actually met her. She's super nice. When she says to go, you know, in order to go fast, you have to go slow. This step really determines what working with this buyer will be like. And the example that we'll see as we go through here, the example is if you don't discuss negotiation, if you don't discuss market dynamics up front, and now you're writing an offer and telling them they have to go above list, the perception is that you're working for the other team to get a deal done and make your commission. Whereas if you had outlined the market or negotiation dynamics ahead of time, you're not in this critical conversation when you're actually writing an offer. You're prepping them ahead of time so they know the market that they're getting into. So I just wanted to mention that really quickly, that this is an important step that a lot of us miss. But it really is important if we want to create success with this buyer, with our clients down the road in the easiest manner possible.
Okay. So before we get to, talking about risk tolerance of your buyers, et cetera, as Kevin said, we're going to review quickly the 10-step buyer process, which in your packet is called the buyer counseling interview. And we're not going to just read through what it is. What I want to talk about as we go through each one is why these different steps are important. So let's remember that we, as Larry Kendall says, you're the director. I always like to say we're advisors, right? We have a shared goal with our client. These buyers want to buy a house. When you get to the point of making an offer, the sellers want to sell the house. We are there to get those two people to come together, to come to terms, to close, for everybody to be happy. The shared goal is that we will find a great home for our clients, close on it as painlessly, efficiently, and at the right price as possible. So in that vein, remembering that anybody can just jump in a car, set up showings, jump in the car, take people out, right? You are a professional, so demonstrate that you're a professional, demonstrate your value. And one of the best ways to do that is to have a process. Professionals have a process. When you go to the dentist, the doctor, you see a lawyer, they have a process. You know you're in a process when you get in there. From the time you walk in the door and the receptionist greets you, checks your appointment, tells you to have a seat, tells you to fill out forms. There's a process. So you feel like you're in a professional environment and within the hands of a professional. And that's what you want to, that's the stage you want to set when you meet your buyers for the first time, or at least start bringing them in for the first time to talk about what they want to do. So let's talk about steps 1 and 2, greet and meet. And I've sort of just alluded to this, which is, you know, we've got the best front desk staff of any brokerage in Chicagoland. When I was coming over from CB, I was like, no way are these people all this happy. And they are. We have the best front desk staff. Use them to your advantage. When you have somebody, when you have a new buyer and you're going to take them out for the first time, tell them you're going to meet them in the office. You'd like them to come in. We're going to go through a few things, just go over the process, and then we'll head out. I've set up some showings, but first let's get together in the office. Number 1, you're not meeting them on the side of the road or on a sidewalk in front of a house. You're in an office. You're already professional. Now leverage that front desk staff. Have them alert them the person is coming, give them their name, ask them to greet them, have them sit down and have you come up and grab them. Again, it's this first impression. You're a professional. You have this great staff behind you, this great company behind you. Use it. Then when you meet them, come in and ask them, you know, hey, let's go sit down in the conference room. You take them away from the lobby. We're not just shaking hands in the lobby and away we go. We're going to go sit down. We're going to take a look at the market, some things. I want to learn a little bit about what your goals are. This is your opportunity to listen. You're here to get information from these clients so that you can create the best possible experience for them. And by telling them, look, this is the process that I have. This is the way I find homes for my clients with the least amount of pain and get them as close to the perfect house as we can. So that's 1 and 2. I'm going to give you over to Kevin for 3 and 4.
All right, so step 3 are the 5 questions. And there are other questions too. If you've been through Ninja, you know this process well. But the idea behind asking questions is to figure out what the problem is that you're trying to solve. All too often, we're super excited. I've been in buyer meetings with agents where we say, you know, we're so ready to launch into what we're going to do to help them, but we don't ask enough questions. We don't ask about their situation, and we also don't assess about their past experience in buying or selling, or what their preconceived notions are about buying and selling. And all of these things are important to understand if we're going to create success for them. If we're going to get them to where they want to go, we have to understand where they are now and where they actually want to go instead of us launching into a process. And remember, nothing makes someone feel better than asking questions and being interested in their answers, and then crafting your response and adjusting based on what you hear as the answers to those questions. So we're not going to go through the questions, but they're all really important to ask. So don't skip this part. Step 4 is the buyer packet and agency disclosure. And this is important. This can be considered the gift that you give them too when you first meet with them. This is something that you want to have prepared that does 2 things. It shows how you're going to create success and how App Properties is going to help you create success for them. It's easy here because we have a buyer packet. We have a buyer portfolio that you can use that is pre-made. The only things you might add in are things about you. And these are takeaways so that after your meeting, they're able to understand and review, because you're covering potentially a lot during this meeting. They're able to go back and review what you talked about during the meeting and reinforces your professionalism and how you are going to be able to create success.
So we have got 5 and 6. So 5 and 6, the funnel process. So let's talk about number 5. This one is really important because you're going to be explaining to your clients how you're going to go through the process of looking at everything that might possibly work for them and eliminating things that we determine will not work so that we're not overwhelmed by the number of properties out there. Using the funnel process is really important. It's something that we're going to go into more detail next week. Next Wednesday's session is going to involve a lot of information on the funnel process. But what we're doing is we're going through everything, making sure they don't feel like they're missing out, because that's always a fear that buyers have, making sure that they don't feel like they're going to pay too much. Again, keeping them abreast of the market. As you look at properties, you're able to put them in their position in that marketplace with your clients as you go through them. So using that funnel process, eliminating as things come, as you go through things and say, okay, let's always keep that rolling top 3, which keeps people from feeling overwhelmed. And then step 6, On a scale of 1 to 10, where do you believe you are in the process? That's the question that Larry asked. And he says most people will say they're a 6, maybe they're a 7. And then the question that he says you should follow with is what would have to happen for you to be a 10, in which point they'll say we found the right house. Well, that's your opening to ask even more questions to understand what does that perfect house look like. And that will lead you into the step 7 with 2 pieces of paper that Kevin will talk about.
Yeah, the 2 pieces of paper, and this is, the 2 pieces of paper are if you have 2 people that are buying, partners, a couple, whatever it might be. If you have these 2 pieces of paper, each one of them lists everything they want in a home, and then they star the top 3. The top 3 things that they can't live without. If you just have one person, you would have 1 sheet of paper, and you just do it with 1 person if there's 1 buyer. But what this does is it narrows down to really find the 85% perfect home. Here's something they teach in Ninja, which is there is no home which has 100% of what anybody wants. There is no perfect home. Even when people build new construction, the things that they choose, or after the fact, they realize that it's not perfect. What they built isn't. So what you want to help a buyer narrow down to is that 85% perfect home where it has the top 3 things. And when you have 2 people, the 2 separate pieces of paper, them doing it individually helps them determine what they need to look for collaboratively, so you don't have a push-pull between the 2 parties, between the 2 buyers. And then step 8 is the what and why. And in the Ninja installation, there he goes into this quite a bit, but oftentimes we find out why a buyer wants something in a home is not what we assume. So an example that they use in the Ninja installation is our golf courses. Is that there's some crazy stat, like 80% of people who live on golf courses don't actually golf. So why do they choose to live on golf courses? It's because they like the green space. They like the open area. They like not being crowded in the backyard with a bunch of other homes. Well, the situation here is if we understand the why a buyer wants to live on a golf course, if it's not golf, if it's that they want green space, that opens up a wide range of other inventory that we might be able to look at, other communities, other areas, et cetera. And so this what and why is really, as they've told you what their top 3 things are, and maybe even going a little deeper into their top 10, ask them to explain why they want that feature, why they want a 3-car garage, do they have 3 cars, et cetera. These sort of questions. And it's learning more, again, about what they're looking for so that you can better get them to where they want to go as fast as possible or on the time schedule that they want.
Okay, which leads us to steps 9 and 10. And step 9 is really about their financial situation, right? Are they cash? Are they going to be a cash offer? Do they need to get a loan? Do they have a loan officer? Do they have a house to sell? And we want to ask these questions because we want to know in advance what their situation is. We might have the opportunity to send them to our favorite proper rate loan officer to see what their options are. Maybe they need to sell first. Maybe they don't have to. Maybe they prefer to sell first. Again, some of these things you're going to learn also as we go through the offer strategies template. But these things are important to understand in advance so that when the time comes to make that offer on that 85% perfect house, that we have that information to help these clients put themselves in the best possible negotiating position available to them based on their financial situation and their risk tolerance. So then we get to step 10, when we find it, what will you do? We ask the client that, okay, now that we have this house that meets all this criteria, now what are you going to do? How do we get them to where they're comfortable to pull the trigger so that they don't say, oh, but something else might come on next week. Oh, we heard there's this and this coming on. We want to wait. This is where having gone over market dynamics in advance with your clients is critical. If you've been educating them all the way along, if you've gone through this process, they are going to understand where this house fits in the marketplace in terms of price. So it's going to help them understand what they should offer, how aggressive they should be, and what is the pace of this market. Is this a mosh pit market? Maybe it is, but this is a house that fell out of contract, is back on the market, and now isn't moving as fast. There are all these dynamics, and if you've been educating them in advance, they're going to be ready to make that decision, and they'll be able to negotiate, which is Kevin's turn.
Yeah, I think the negotiation, a lot of times what we do is, and I know this, I did it, we all do it at times, we feel rushed. And so we don't not only do step 1, we don't do step 1, which is this meeting. We don't set expectations ahead of time. We write an offer. We don't explain what the market dynamics are. So we're trying to push them into doing something that they either don't understand or aren't comfortable with. And then we get into negotiation. And when we get into negotiation, we haven't teed them up for what all of the options are. And remember, our job is to lay out the options and the potential outcomes. The earlier we do that, the better it is for everybody as we set expectations. And so in terms of, Carma just talked about in terms of the market, in terms of negotiation, laying out the plan for what could happen. Hey, if we end up in a multiple offer situation, these are the 3 ways that the seller might address it. When you get to the point where you're writing an offer and you anticipate there might be multiple offers, you have the ability to reference back to your first conversation or a reminder you told them while you were out looking at properties. But you're not telling them for the first time that they need to write an offer, and that if there is a multiple offer situation and the seller asks for final and best, that you're going to ask them, what is the price that you're willing to lose this home for? If you lose the home for this price, will you be sad? Will you regret it? And I know Carma talks about no regrets in the way that she counseled her clients in the past. But you need to lay out the plan for what negotiation looks like ahead of time so that they understand what the options are, so that when they get into the situation, they already understand the dynamics and what they may need to do to get the home if they decide that they want it.
And having them understand in advance their options and feeling comfortable as they move through this process with where they are on the spectrum of risk, that is always going to make them feel like you are their advocate. And that's what you are. You are there to be their advocate. You're not just trying to get them to buy the first house they look at and write an offer really quickly, well above list, so that you don't have to work anymore. You want them to recognize that everything you're doing is to enable them to make the best decision for them, that you're going to go through all of this process for that end goal, that they are happy buyers. Because at the end of the day, the buyers with no regrets are the best customers you have, clients you have for referrals. And someday those buyers are going to be sellers. And you're going to want them to remember that you did a great job for them, that they didn't pay too much. That's something we hear all the time from agents. Oh God, now I have to sell this house. They think they overpaid, or now it's what they paid, which is a common scenario right now. But if you have gone through this process and at every single stage, your clients felt that you were their advocate and everybody did the best they could in that market at that point in time, they're going to be happy with the result and you're going to get referrals. So using this offer strategies to win template is a great way, even in advance, before you're ready to write an offer, to determine your client's risk tolerance. Now, why would we want to do that? Again, we want them to feel comfortable, to feel educated, because when people feel educated, they feel in control. We want them to feel in control. We're in control of the process, but the buyer controls the decision. And so that they can feel comfortable about the decision that they make, we want them to feel educated and that we are there just to guide them. So by going through this, you can say to them, look, let's go through this in advance so that you understand the different options we have when writing an offer to enable you to win the house that you want at a comfortable point for you, with where you are in what you're willing to pay, what kind of financing you want to get, what kind of contingencies you're willing to give up on, right? So going through this, you can see there's price, you can talk about an escalation clause, you can tell them you need to draw a line in the sand. This is what we're going to pay. Above that, we are not going to be comfortable. Below that, we'll be thrilled. But at this point, we're good either way. If we get it or we don't get it, we're not going to wake up the next day with any regrets. They need to have that upper limit and they need to agree on it. Nobody can pull you over that line. That's something I always used to say to my clients. This is your house, your money, and your decision. Nobody can make you move over that line, but make sure you both understand what that line is and what you're willing to do. So then the cash, the financing, cash and which type of lending, et cetera, that gives you the opportunity to talk to them about different options. Maybe there's somebody who can actually buy before selling, or maybe they have, they want to put more down, and it's a good opportunity also, I think, to talk about earnest money at this point, just because we're talking about cash and how that can make offers more impactful. Inspection, appraisal, these are things you want to go through and explain to them. Are you willing to waive an inspection? Are you willing to say that you will do an inspection, but you'll waive all items under $1,000 or under $250? Asking these questions is going to help you assess where they sit as far as risk goes. Then we go down appraisal, the same thing. Are you willing to buy a house that doesn't appraise? Is it worth that to you, even though the appraisal might be 10,000, 15,000 off? If not, then what would be comfortable for you? Some people are going to say nothing. It has to appraise to list price. It has to appraise the sales price. It has to appraise, or I'll bring $5,000 to the table because this is the house I want. And then timing, always knowing what the seller's timing is. Are you willing to close and rent back to the seller? That can be really powerful. Attorneys don't always love it, but it is really powerful in getting deals done. Understanding as an agent what the seller's timeline is critical. That's where you're asking questions of the other agent, where you're getting information as much as you can, talking to your clients about the speed of close. And do you have a home sale contingency or a home close contingency? Will you have those? Going through all of this is going to make writing an offer so much easier when the time comes, and your clients are going to feel really educated and in control. And then just talking about what we can do to make this more appealing to the seller, right? The seller experience. What things could we pay for that would make the seller more likely to take our offer over someone else's? So when you go through all these things and you ask them the questions, you're going to get information that gives you a sense of where they are on this risk tolerance spectrum, right? So we've got the 4 personality types. You've got your party, your power, your peace, and perfection. So Larry talks mostly about the peace and perfection. Power and party, they are more willing to get in there, be aggressive. They're not as worried about losing. They're willing to lose a house if they can't get it on their terms. That group is a little easier in a multiple offer market. The peace and perfection buyers, as Larry said, are the ones that really need to go through this process and really need to feel comfortable. And when you have those buyers, you want to come up with some ways to make them feel more comfortable. Maybe they do need to wait until September, October, November, when it's a little quieter in your particular market in that price point. So, we can do the things that he mentioned, looking for houses that might seem tainted, that are expired, that have bad photos, or the MLS information is wrong. All those things are great examples, but that's the stuff that we can do to help our peace and perfection people feel more comfortable as they go through the process. Any other thoughts, Kevin?
Yeah, I think just to wrap, we covered a lot here because we went through, the importance of Act 1, the importance of this prep meeting. We went through the 10 steps that go into the meeting. We went into a little bit of, Carma just went through sort of the taking analysis on the personality type when you're writing an offer, preparing to write an offer with your buyer to understand what the limits, what type of personality they have. So you can, again, suggest how they might approach situations and not put them in an uncomfortable situation or make them feel like you're not on their team. So we covered a lot. What I want to really, really stress is that this meeting is the most important thing in working with a buyer. And I think we have all been there. If you've done any buyer transactions whatsoever, you've been in a situation where someone wanted to see a property. You met at a Starbucks for 10 minutes and saw the property, or met at a Starbucks after you saw the property. You're writing an offer. Typically what happens, usually it doesn't go through. Usually it's not accepted. Usually they don't follow your lead. Usually they already have some sort of preconceived notion of what they need to do. And now we've wasted time. And the unfortunate part of this in the stories that I've heard, where we don't prepare clients, we don't set expectations, we rush into something, we do end up writing an offer and we're excited. It doesn't get accepted. They end up blaming us. They end up blaming us because we were the ones that assisted them, but we didn't educate or coach them. And so what I would suggest is, no matter what, at the very first part of working with a buyer, I know that there's this need to, this desire to want to rush out, throw them in your car, schedule 7 showings, get them into properties immediately, but this is a really important step so that you can create success for them as quickly as possible. So as Tammy Spalding said, go fast or go slow to go fast. Start with this meeting to be able to set expectations, and it will make your life much easier. It will make communication much smoother, and you'll get them to where they want to go. So that's it.
All right.
So thanks, everybody. In the chat, I only see positive comments still, so that's awesome. Thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it. I hope everyone has a great day. If you want to share your feedback, you can text Carma right now. Look her up in the agent directory. And we really appreciate it.